This is the last topic under ethical and legal issues, and it's about prescriptions, documentation, advanced directives, and reporting responsibilities. The nurse is obligated to carry out a primary health care provider's prescription, except when the nurse believes a prescription to be inappropriate or inaccurate. The nurse carrying out an inaccurate prescription may be legally responsible for any harm suffered by the client. If no resolution occurs regarding the prescription in question, the nurse should contact the nurse manager or supervisor. The nurse should follow specific guidelines for telephone prescriptions. 1. Date and time the entry. 2. When receiving prescription or order, repeat it to the primary healthcare provider and record it. 3. Sign the prescription, begin with TO for telephone order. Write the primary healthcare provider's name and sign the prescription. 4. If another nurse witnessed the prescription, that nurse signature follows. 5. The primary healthcare provider needs to countersign the prescription within a time frame according to agency policy. The nurse should ensure that all components of a medication prescription are documented. 1. It should have a date and time. 2. Medication name. 3. Medication dosage. 4. Route of administration. 5. Frequency of administration. 6. Primary healthcare provider's signature. The nurse should never carry out a prescription if it is unclear or inappropriate. The person who wrote the prescription should be contacted immediately. Now let's go to documentation. It's legally required by accrediting agencies, state licensing laws, and state nurse and medical practice acts. The nurse should follow agency guidelines and procedures. Do's and don'ts documentation guidelines. 1. Date and time entries. 2. Provide objective, factual, and complete documentation. 3. Document care, medications, treatments, and procedures as soon as possible after completion. 4. Document client responses to interventions. 5. Document consent for or refusal of treatments. 6. Document calls made to other primary healthcare providers. 7. Use codes as appropriate for subjective data. 8. Use correct spelling, grammar, and punctuation. 9. Sign and title each entry. 10. Follow agency policies when an error is made. 11. Follow agency guidelines regarding late entries. 12. Use only the user identification code, name, or password for computerized documentation. 13. Maintain privacy and confidentiality of documented information printed from the computer. 14. Do not document for others or change documentation for other individuals. 15. Do not use unacceptable abbreviations. 16. Do not use judgmental or evaluative statements such as uncooperative client. 17. Do not leave blank spaces on documentation forms. 18. Do not lend access identification computer codes to another person. Change password at regular intervals. Client and family teaching. The nurse should provide complete instructions in a language that the client or family can understand. Avoid using medical terms. Use layman's terms instead. Document client and family teaching, what was taught, evaluation of understanding, and who was present during the teaching. Inform the client of what could happen if information shared during teaching is not followed. Advanced directives. Patient Self-Determination Act is a law that requires clients be provided with information about their right to have written directions about the care that they wish to receive in the event that they become incapacitated and are unable to make healthcare decisions. On admission to a healthcare facility, the client is asked about the existence of an advance directive, and if one exists, it must be documented and included as part of the medical record. If the client signs an advance directive at the time of admission, it must be documented in the client's medical record. There are two basic types of advance directives. These are: 1. Instructional directives. It lists the medical treatment that the client chooses to omit or refuse if the client becomes unable to make decisions and is terminally ill. 2. Durable power of attorney for healthcare. Appoints a person, healthcare proxy, chosen by the client to make healthcare decisions on the client's behalf when the client can no longer make decisions. Do not resuscitate prescriptions, DNR. The primary healthcare provider writes a DNR prescription if the client and primary healthcare provider have made the decision that the client's health is deteriorating and the client chooses not to undergo cardiopulmonary resuscitation if needed. The client or his or her legal representative must provide informed consent for the DNR status. The DNR prescription must be defined clearly so that other treatment not refused by the client will be continued. Some states offer DNR comfort care and DNR comfort care arrest protocols. These protocols list specific actions that the healthcare providers will take when providing cardiopulmonary resuscitation. All healthcare personnel must know whether a client has a DNR prescription. If a client does not have a DNR prescription, healthcare providers need to make every effort to revive the client. A DNR prescription needs to be reviewed regularly according to agency policy and may need to be changed if the client's status changes. DNR protocols may vary from state to state, and it is important for the nurse to know their state's protocols. The nurse role. Discussing advance directives with the client opens the communication channel to establish what is important to the client and what the client may view as promoting life versus prolonging dying. The nurse needs to ensure that the client has been provided with information about the right to identify written directions about the care that the client wishes to receive. On admission to a healthcare facility, the nurse determines whether an advance directive exists and ensures that it is part of the medical record. The nurse also offers information about advance directives if the client indicates he or she wants more information. The nurse ensures that the primary healthcare provider is aware of the presence of an advance directive. All healthcare workers need to follow the directions of an advance directive to be safe from liability. Some agencies have specific policies that prohibit the nurse from signing as a witness to a legal document such as an instructional directive. If allowed by the agency, when the nurse acts as a witness to a legal document, the nurse must document the event and the factual circumstances surrounding the signing in the medical record. Documentation as a witness should include who was present, any significant comments by the client, and the nurse's observations of the client's conduct during this process. Reporting responsibilities. Nurses are required to report certain communicable diseases or criminal activities such as child or elder abuse or domestic violence, dog bite or other animal bite, gunshot or stab wounds, assaults, and homicides, and suicides to the appropriate authorities. Impaired nurse. If the nurse suspects that a coworker is abusing chemicals and potentially jeopardizing a client's safety, the nurse must report the individual to the nursing supervisor or nursing administration in a confidential manner. Client safety is always the first priority. Nursing administration notifies the Board of Nursing regarding the nurse behavior. Many institutions have policies that allow for drug testing if impairment is suspected. Occupational Safety and Health Act, OSHA, requires that an employer provide a safe workplace for employees according to regulations. Employees can confidentially report working conditions that violate regulations. An employee who reports unsafe working conditions cannot be retaliated against by the employer. Sexual harassment is prohibited by state and federal laws. Sexual harassment includes unwelcome conduct of a sexual nature. Follow agency policies and procedures to handle reporting a concern or complaint.